Hello, every pony. So, first, a quick update about the whole Katawa Shoujo projecty thing. After a grand total of one audition, um, I think maybe we're gonna assume that it's not really a project that most of you are interested in. And I suppose that does make sense. This is, after all, a pony related YouTube channel. So, moving forward, I think I will focus project ideas on ponies. Fair enough. Second, I'm a little under the weather. I'm fighting some chest congestion and sinus stuff. So, I probably don't sound terribly great. But at the same time, I do currently have some time available to record. So, we're going to make the most of it. I also have no alcohol, which makes me very, very sad on the inside. Very, very sad. I cry. Cry, cry. Bitter tears. Okay. Let me adjust my microphone. That's better. Okay. So, we are up to part 9 of On a Cross and Arrow, the chapter entitled Under a Midnight Star. And without further ado, I think we're going to get right into it. Hit. Soda. You don't take the pain away. Alright, anyway. I don't have a problem, I swear. Alright. Seriously, this time. For real. For realsies, not for play. Alright. She snorted, before blinking and looking around. Nighttime had fallen, and every pony was snoozing away. Every pony that was, except for Twilight Sparkle, apparently. She sat herself upright, and rubbed at her eyes, taking a look at her companions. Dash was snoring loudly, on her back. Applejack seemingly in a contrast with her to see who could make the most racket. A contest with her, actually, to see who could make the most racket. I have not read this one yet, so I'm going in totally blind here. Rarity was tucked away in a corner, in a pile of blankets, as she murmured something about dream stallions. Pinky, surprisingly, was the most serene of the bunch, hooves curled up daintily as she snored. Snoozed. Snoozed, actually, would be the word. Okay. And Fluttershy, she found herself tearing up, as she realized that the yellow Pegasus had fallen asleep sitting upright, head resting upon the hutch door, as Angela snoozed as well, curled up as close as she could to the timid pony's head. I can't do this, she then realized. They're counting on me, and I can't do this. But I can't do that either. I don't know what I need to do, but I can't. The unicorn planted a hoof on the ground as she lifted herself quietly. I can't. Please. She got onto all fours, looking over her friends that she'd come to love, that she'd come to trust, that had come to trust her. I can't. She wasn't sure who she was pleading to, but beads appeared at the corners of her eyes as she realized that she was beginning to walk away from the group, towards the cave's entrance. She knew what she had to do, for all of them, but her fear, the relentless, unyielding fear, I just can't. Within moments, the lavender pony exited the safety of the hedge's shelter. The field and foliage about her was lit by the moon, giving her enough to see by. It also allowed her to see the hamlet that she had come to see her home, far in the distance, and the one building whose lights were still on at this time of night. Slowly, alone, undisguised, and with a lump in her throat, Twilight began the long walk towards Ponyville. No pony was on the streets. She had never had cause to stroll through them at this time of night before, save that one time when she had to lull a star bear to sleep, but she decided she had to do this more often. It was relaxing. At least, she thought this was relaxing, up to a point where she turned a corner and spied the lit windows of the Ponyville Public Library. Then that knot returned, choking her as bad as before. It's not too late, she told herself. I could turn around and go back. Yeah, I could go back to the hedge, then go back to sleep. No pony would have to know. I could wait till tomorrow morning and try the spell again. I could do that. Yeah. But is that fair to them? To make them wait any longer? To have them wait on me to make a spell I had no idea how to control? That I can't reference anymore? I don't have the book. I can organize, write, and memorize, but I'm absolute crap if I don't have a book backing me up. Even if I do cast it tomorrow, there's no guarantee, absolutely none, that I'll be able to do it successfully on my own. I need help. But the one pony who can help in this world, can I do it? Can I face him? Somewhere within that inner monologue, she had begun walking again without even realizing it. As she looked up from the ground, she realized that she was no longer viewing the great tree from a distance. She was right at its door. Her door. His door. She shook as she lifted a hoof, and knocked. There was silence at first. For a second, she was hopeful that every pony inside had simply dropped off to sleep with the lights on. Then the door handle began to turn. She hadn't heard any pony come to the door. The knot tightened as she braced herself, coming face to face with nothing at first. The door finished its wide swing open before an owl flapped out from behind it. The bird let its eyes rest upon her before perching itself on the door handle. The unicorn took a tentative step inside before looking back at the nocturnal avian. I guess you're not called Aloysius here, are you? Who? She simply rolled her eyes before looking around. Books were left open here and there, cluttering the floor, stacked on the tables, and littering the desks. And she didn't make this mess. Suddenly, she had a new appreciation of what Spike did for her, every time she went on a studying binge, which was apparently what her male self was doing right now. Her heart froze as she spotted him, hunched over a desk, head down low, relentlessly poring through the heavy-set text that was laid out before him. His back was turned. He hadn't seen her come in. Her hooves felt like lead as she stepped towards him. She could hear him speaking in a voice that was pitched low enough as to not disturb the assistant sleeping upstairs. Her ears peeked forwards as she tried to make out his words. There are 4 explanations that each answer the question of why in different ways. These various means of explanation can be divided into the 4 general types of causality, as follows. Aristotle, she realized, recognizing his words. He's reading Aristotle's rules of causality. His head shifted as he continued reading. The first cause, the material cause, is the physical matter, the mass of raw material, of which something is made, of which the subject itself consists of. He moved his head as he went on to the next rule. The second cause, the formal cause, tells us why, but analogy to the plans of an artisan. A thing is intended. What it is originally planned to be. What it is originally planned to be. Dusk's head rose a couple of inches. He wasn't sure, but it had sounded like some pony else had spoken the rule alongside him. He looked back down as he recited the third rule. The third cause, the efficient cause, is that external entry, an outside force. He found himself trailing off. From which the rite of change, or the end of the change, first starts. Twilight finished behind him. He didn't move, didn't even budge. The Stain instead raised his head up level as he spoke the final part from memory alone. The final cause is that for the sake of which a thing exists or is done, including both purposeful and instrumental actions. The mare that was seated behind him opened her mouth, unable to stop the following words from spilling out. The final cause, or telos, is the purpose or end that something is supposed to serve. A moment of silence descended between the two. Neither pony moved, neither one spoke a word, but the both of them were now keenly aware of this second presence that was in the room. Finally, the lavender stallion asked the air quietly. What is your final cause? What do you want? She almost choked right there. The lump that was in her throat felt so large and swollen like she would gag on it. Should a misplaced word pass through her lips. What do I say? How do I even begin? How would you want to be told? All we want, Twilight finally spoke. All we want is just to go home. Dusk remained still for a few seconds more, before slowly turning around and looking upon his own double for the first time. His mane was slightly in disarray, purple eyes half hidden by hair, but it still allowed the Femi to see his pupils shrink as he took her in. He got to his feet and walked quietly towards her, before seating himself in front of his filly self. To her credit, she didn't bolt or freak out. Instead, they kept their eyes locked on each other, studying features and differences, face to face with no pony else but him and her own self. At length, the colt spoke again. My name is Duskshine. I am the prize student of our beloved leader, Prince Solaris, ruler of Equestria, and I am also the librarian of the books in Branch's Ponyville Public Library. And you? She tried her best to swallow that lump. My name is Twilight Sparkle. I'm the prize student of our beloved leader, Princess Celestia, ruler of Equestria, and I am also the librarian of the books in Branch's Ponyville Public Library. There was a pause, and then a nod. We at least seem to have the same taste in bags, he attempted to joke nervously. Twilight looked to her side. She had been carrying her saddlebag this whole way. She didn't even remember having put it on, leaving the hedge. Her horn lit as she probed its contents and found, to her surprise, a book floating out. She stared at it before facing her doppelganger again. Here, she simply said as she levitated the green volume over to him. I'm hoping it's not overdue. Dusk took the book into his own hold. It was the book he had been rather afraid had gone completely missing. Supernaturals. He offered her a grateful smile before hovering the book and placing it in its proper spot on a nearby shelf. Another bout of uneasy silence descended. This is ridiculous, Dusk found himself thinking. I talk to myself all the time, and now there's two of me here. Neither of us can think of anything to say. The lavender mare then whispered, I'm sorry. He shook his mane and trotted a bit closer. I've spent days looking for you. I know. I'm sorry we put you through so much trouble. Why did you hide away? We could have helped. We didn't want to affect your world any more than we possibly could. She directed her eyes to the floor, a depressed look on her face. Though, if the past week has told me anything, it's that it's nay impossible to accomplish. Despite the tone and situation, the unicorn stallion found himself chuckling. How many of you are here, altogether? She looked back up at him. 6. All mares. He didn't need to make any wild guesses as to who the other 5 fillies were. He seated himself again as he spoke. Butterscotch? Fluttershy, Twilight nodded. Rainbow Blitz? Rainbow Dash. Applejack? At this, she couldn't help but give her own chuckle. No change there. Still Applejack. Oh, then... Elusive? Rarity. And Berry Bubble. Pinkie Pie. I know, I was rather frightened too. The both of them shared an uneasy laugh that died off as they resumed staring at each other. The silence was deafening. From above came the soft snores of a baby dragon. I had thought you had all come here on purpose, but it really was an accident, wasn't it? Dusk asked. A nod. We were just trying to visit Manhattan. Applejack said she knew the place well, and I found this book, Exploring the Ether for Fun and Profit. Twilight's head shot up, a surprised expression on her face that made the cult smile. His horn lit up, and a book flew from the numerous stacks, over to hover between the pair of ponies. It was the same traveling spell book. He opened the tome to the same page that contained the teleportation spell. This is purely conjecture on my part, but you mixed up a portion of the teleportation spell with the dimensional viewing spell that was directly below it. You tapped into our own dimension thinking it was a ley line for Manhattan, didn't you? As the purple mare read over the rift viewing spell and its lengthy list of warnings, she found her ears burning, realizing that she could have avoided had she not gone off at the spur of the moment. It was the frequency, she clarified. I tuned into the wrong one when I tried to perceive the ley lines. I used the one in the view spell instead of the one listed in the teleportation ritual. I found this book a few days ago, the stallion began, reading over the book as well. When I first started reading, I was really excited to memorize some of these spells, but before I even got to this page, something happened. Her eyes turned to the side as she regarded her double with curiosity. What was it? There was a surge of magical energy outside of Ponyville. I'm surprised no other unicorn sensed it. When I went to check it out, I found a hill that was soaked with leftover PKE residue. Twilight gaped. Our teleportation spell. And then, when I got back to the library, there was Butterscotch, wrapped up in a hat and scarf. He shook his head as he chuckled. Sounded weird. Said he was sick, checked out supernaturals, and then he turned his own green eyes to the side to meet hers. His own... Where did I get green from? God, I really am under the weather, aren't I? Alright. He then turned his own eyes, which is not even vaguely spelled the same as green, to the side to meet hers. But you already knew that, didn't you? Gulping, she nodded. He then continued his spiel. After he left, I got back to the book. I found the teleportation spell, and my first thought was, I know 10 ponies, but there are 5 in particular I'd love to invite. Then I remembered Butterscotch was sick, and so I moved on to the next spell. Once I finished reading it, well, the pieces started falling into place, the female equine finished. You had a hunch that something had happened. Yes. As after I read the spell and referenced the rules of causality, I decided to pay Butterscotch a visit. Turns out he wasn't sick, and he didn't have the book he'd checked out, nor did he remember doing so. And then later that same day, Blitz flies in and tells me that our timid friend has met his match. Hang on, I lost my place. Oh god. Alright, sorry, here we go. Right. And it just keeps getting worse from there. Now Twilight was full shame-faced, looking at the floor. Dash invaded Blitz's home. Applejack got into an argument with her cousin. Rarity out and tricked us when she went to meet with herself for the express purpose of romance, and Pinky and Barry, we very nearly dodged a bullet there. You've certainly made our lives very interesting these past few days, Dusk admitted, looking at his doppelganger, a worried expression on his face. You mean we've made them a complete disaster? I tried my best to leave your world untouched, and I failed. Her entire frame seemed to sag. Hey now, he started, a hoof going out towards her, almost touching her shoulder. Even if things didn't go according to plan, you know, you still managed to save us. Her head tilted upwards slightly, causing him to retract his foreleg. Save you? How exactly? Well, think about it. Either our worlds are naturally asynchronous with each other, or you also somehow travel back in time by about an hour. Either way, if you and your friends hadn't touched down in Ponyville, if your Fluttershy hadn't shown up in the library pretending to be sick... crap. Then more than likely, we would have wound up in your horseshoes. I would have gathered my friends. Applejack would have suggested Manhattan, and Blitz would have donated a feather. Knowing me, I'd have botched the spell, and then we would have wound up in your world instead. Solaris says, man, there's probably another pair of dimensions out there where that's exactly what happened. We'd have wandered around Ponyville looking at all the unfamiliar ponies trying to find a familiar face. Lyra and Bonbon, the filly suddenly stated. That drew a surprised glance. Who what now? Lyra and Bonbon. The first ponies we recognized here were your Harpsy and Babar. In our world, they're known as Lyra and Bonbon. Dusk's eyes went slightly wide at the thought, but he shook his head. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is this. We owe you. If you and your group hadn't come here, then more than likely we would have been undergoing the very same thing all of you have. Twilight let her eyes dip low in thought. Her male self had a point there. She could easily imagine the frustration she would have suffered had 6 stallions landed themselves in her world. Her imagination relived those past few days. Through her mirror she ran through the Everfree forest, tried to track down a captured colt, and then chased a pair of fleeing stallions from the village. We still caused you trouble, she stated. You must have been really frustrated trying to find us. Well, I did have my moments, yes. He tilted his head down to look into her eyes. But that's all in the past. You're here now, Twilight. The only thing I really want to know is, why didn't you come forward sooner? I know you said you didn't want to affect our world, but you know that we would have still helped. Why didn't you let us? The filly found herself stuttering as she lifted her head. Alright, hang on. Prepare for stuttering mode. Because I was scared of you, Dusk, she answered, tears forming at the corners of her lavender orbs. I was so scared. By Celestia's mane, I'm still scared of you. Can't you feel it? I've had this lump appear in my throat every time you've been near me. Tell me, aren't you feeling it now as well? The purple stallion shifted his eyes to the side as he gulped. He was feeling it right at that moment. Actually, ever since he'd heard her voice. But he'd been trying his best to ignore it. I'm sorry, Dusk, but I can't explain this irrational fear. I mean, seriously, you're me. I'm you. The only difference between us is our genders, and that just makes things even more awkward. How am I supposed to feel about you? Do I treat you like a cousin, like Applejack does hers? With abject aggression like Rainbow? Dare I even consider the route that Rarity took? I'm so confused, and it scares me. There's no guide on how to deal with situations like this, because this situation's never happened before. At least, I don't think there's a guide. If there is, I haven't read it yet. Dusk found himself becoming a bit edgier as his reflection continued her outpour. He'd never been good with emotional fillies, and now not only was he dealing with one, it was himself in female form. As her voice continued to increase in volume, he found himself pointing up the stairs, going, "Shh." Instantly her eyes widened and hooves clamped to her mouth. They both sat in silence, looking up at the bedroom above. Thankfully, the quiet snore of the snoozing dragoness continued uninterrupted. "Sorry," Twilight whispered, rubbing the tears away from her eyes. "I didn't mean to. I get so carried away." The colt shook his head. "It's all right. She slept through worse," he assured, before a corner of his mouth quirked in a smile. "Though, I'd imagine you already knew that." She gave him a nod, and for the moment let the previous topic pass away. They were content to just sit there, listening to the sounds of Spine's breathing. "I miss him, you know," Twilight quipped, her eyes still misty. "Your Spines, you mean?" "I named him Spike," she replied. "I left him in charge of the library. Right before we left, I told him it would probably only take us 2-3 days before we came back from traveling." She found herself sniffling again. I hope he's all right. I never got him his pizza. Peppers and emeralds with extra cheese. His favorite." He found himself chuckling despite it all. "I'm sure he's doing fine. You know how they are when it comes to pizza." He looked back up at the loft and sighed. "I'm willing to bet he's holding down the fort just like Spines would, if I had left. It's a little strange to think of her as a guy, but their personalities are still the same despite whatever gender they are, am I right?" Twilight nodded, eyes still concentrating on the loft above them. "It's been one of the things about this world that has comforted us. Every pony we meet here still acts like the pony we knew back home. When I saw and heard Spines for the first time, it comforted me to no end to see how similar she was to Spike. You should be proud to have someone like her in your life." "Believe me, I am," came the reply. "Getting Spines when I was growing up. Even though she's not a pony, she's as good as a little sister to me." Another bout of silence passed before the colt turned back to his visitor. She was regarding him with a new light in her eyes. "A sibling," she whispered. "The same with me and Spike. He became my little assistant, but he'll always be my little brother first." Somewhere in there, both unicorns began the same thought process. "I don't know how to deal with you. You, this pony who is me but isn't. We have so much in common. So much that we've both done. So many feelings I can't understand. If I can't think of you as a cousin, or a rival, or a lover, can I think of you as a friend? Can I overcome my fear and think of you as somebody close to me? Like..." Slowly, tentatively, Twilight and Dusk each extended a hoof. Their movement paused for just a second before they finally met and touched each other, simply holding hooves, staring at each other in the library's low light. "Dusk," she found herself speaking. "I've tried to perform the spell again to get us back, but I can't do it. I can't find our thread. I need help. Please help us. Please help my friends. Get us back home. That's all I ask for. Please." The colt allowed a smile to grace his lips before nodding. "Sure thing, Twilight. I'll do everything in my power to help you, sis." And it was then that the mare suddenly found herself breathing easy. The lump in her throat had disappeared. In its place, she didn't know. It felt like something. Like a tingle, maybe. Like a spark. She knew that whatever it was bright. "He really doesn't mean us any harm. He's nothing to be afraid of. He's me. And yet, he's not. But in a good way. I can think of him like this. I can think of him like I think of Spike. As my brother." She returned the smile. "Thank you, brother. I was scared that you wouldn't agree. I don't know why still, but I thought that..." The purple stallion allowed an eyebrow to raise. "It's because I'm male, isn't it? Despite how similar we are, you originally thought that by virtue of gender, my thought process would be significantly different from yours, right?" She lowered her head, ears drooping in a nod. However, her head was tilted back upwards to face his as he gave her a reassuring gaze. "It's okay. I know a lot of us men out there tend to be rough, but I'm not one of them. I'm you. And besides occasionally exploding over a scientific conundrum, you know how that is, I try my best to not perpetuate the masculine mindset stereotype. Seriously, sis, did you really think I'd turn you away? The filly allowed herself to sit up straight, and she became more at ease. I did, but I know better now. Thank you, Dusk. I never should have doubted you. Though, I have to wonder, did you really think we were going to invade or replace you like pod ponies? He flushed. You heard that? Well, you see, I didn't have a lot to work with, so Twilight found his blush rather amusing and stifled a giggle. As she did so, however, it turned into a yawn, a rather hefty one at that. By the time it finished, she possessed a set of rosy cheeks herself. Sorry about that. It is rather late. Guilty conscience drove me to wake up and seek you out. Wow. He blinked before looking back at the door. So, are you heading back to your friends? Going to tell them I'm willing to help? I really should. The female student turned her head towards the door, thinking of the long walk it had taken from their hiding place to here, before turning her head back upwards towards the bedroom. Her face a picture of longing as she thought of her own bed so close at hoof. But I have to think, should I wake them now, or wait till morning? Dusk caught her line of sight and chuckled again. You know, that bed up there is as much yours as it is mine. A new heat suddenly overtook Twilight's face. Oh no, it wouldn't be right of me. I mean, this is your dimension, not mine. I can walk. It's just... Again her body sagged from weariness. Right on the edge of the Everfree forest. Yeah, I'd figured. He replied, taking his hooves and walking around his double. Really, I insist. Stay for the night. I'll just drag out the second bed and sleep on it tonight. You can have mine. I'll have Aloysius wake the both of us up in the morning before Spines does, and we can go get your friends then. The filly grimaced. The second bed? Isn't that thing still full of lumps from when Applejack and Rarity, Elusive, fought inside it? Idly, she wondered if males had sleepovers or not. Of course we do. Well, yeah, that's true, but it'll still sleep. The colt continued walking towards the stairs. Besides, if it's that uncomfortable, there's always the floor. Dusk, She bit her lip before finally airing the words she had been thinking. Do you want to, share the bed? Oh, snap. He stopped in his tracks and looked at her in disbelief. Slowly, he turned his head back around to give her a long gaze. She returned his look with equal curiosity. Are you sure that'd be proper? Well, why not? Either way, it's okay. I'd still wake up with myself. I know. Still, what I mean is... He trotted forward, placing himself in front of the lavender mare. We know each other. We know who we are, but... Do you trust your own brother enough to do that? Twilight stood her ground, noting that the flush she was seeing on his face was similar to her own. Do you trust your own sister? She asked back. The twin purple ponies stood there, facing each other, the question lingering in the air. Around them, the night snoozed on. Crap. Okay, totally, forgot. I couldn't know who was supposed to be talking. Sorry. Alright, hang on. God, I'm terrible at this not pre-reading stuff, aren't I? Alright, anyway. Good morning, girls. Rainbow Dash muttered a plea for 10 more minutes of sleep in some arcane language that incorporated copious amounts of yawning and mumbling. Come on, girls, up and at 'em. Twilight? Applejack moaned, stretching her back out and wincing as a couple of joints popped. What's up, Sugar Cube? I'm up, for one. And the rest of you need to be too. Come on, let's get to it. Oh, my stars, what time is it? Rarity whined as she removed her sleeping mask. Twilight, I must protest. Twilight? Fluttershy snorted herself awake at the noise and found herself looking around quickly, heedless of the mesh pattern that had imprinted itself into her cheek fur, which sounds adorable. The one pony whose voice they were hearing they couldn't find anywhere inside the hedge. Woo, are we playing hide-and-seek? Pinky bubbled, effortlessly perking herself awake. If we are, you're good, Twilight. There was a chuckle. It came from outside the entrance. I'm not hiding, silly filly. I'm right over here. Twilight? Outside the hedge? The apple farmer was the first one to scramble onto all fours and gallop over to the opening. Twi, what in tarnation's going... She paused as she poked her head out. There was her purple unicorn friend, standing there a couple of feet from where the cave of the warren began. She seemed well rested, her eyes bright and open, and her saddlebag securely tied on her midsection. What AJ had not been expecting was for a stallion of similar hue and breed as her friend to have been standing a foot or so behind and to the left of the student. His own eyes were quite wide. Apparently he hadn't been expecting any pony to actually have been hiding in there. Twilight! Dash screamed. That was a horrible Dash voice. Hang on. That was like the worst. That was practically shining armor right there. Twilight! God. I hate being sick. Twilight! Oh god, I can't do it. I can't, get high and yet be kind of, gravelly at the same time. I'm still gonna have to cop out on this. I'm really sorry. Twilight! Dash screamed, causing the orange pony to grimace from the Pegasus' sheer volume, which we're gonna just pretend that I had. She had stuck her head out next to AJ and had just witnessed the same scene. What are you doing? He's right behind you. God, that's terrible. Twilight blinked and looked behind her at Dusk, who returned her blinking. She then faced her friends again with a smile on her face. That he is, Rainbow. Why don't you come out and say hi? The two fillies were flabbergasted, their jaws hanging wide in absolute shock. They didn't even budge when Fluttershy squeezed past them and joined the two unicorns. Oh, hi there, Dusk. The yellow pony spoke, her mood somewhat lighter than one would have expected. I'm Fluttershy. You probably don't know, but, that day when you thought Butterscotch was sick, well, that was actually me. I'm sorry for the trick. Excuse me. He silenced her with a smile and a wave of his hoof. Twilight told me all about it, and she returned the book. You have nothing to apologize for, dear. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Twilight! A grandiose voice spoke before another pony, a certain white unicorn, squeezed itself out of the burrow. Her eyes quickly and calmly took in the side of the colt, while Dusk did his level best to not oogle her frame. Why, it appears to me you've been quite busy last night. Does that mean that... Her blue eyes began to glisten. Are we actually... The magician nodded before her expression turned serious. Okay, listen up. Fluttershy, you can release Angela now. Every pony, get packing. We have about 15 minutes before the rest of Ponyville wakes up. Come on. It's time to go home. Alright. I'm getting the distinct impression that all the talking is not helping my sinuses or my throat or my chest congestion. But oh well. It was an interesting-looking procession that walked through the streets of Ponyville in the early hours of that morning. 7 ponies overall, 2 of which looked like they could be twins. There was barely any pony out on the streets at that hour, which allowed the group a relative peace with which to use. So, finally went and listened to reason, eh, Sugar Cube? Applejack joked, tossing a fond smile in Twilight's direction. Yeah, I guess you can say I did, she admitted, a blush of shame on her face. I'm sorry I was so... scared, guys. But you were right, this really is the better way. I'm glad you came around to it, Dusk chuckled, looking back at the group. I still don't know why you chose to do it at 1 in the morning, but I'm not complaining. Good heavens, Twilight, Rarity crooned. So late at night. You didn't even wake us? I had a bad case of guilty conscience. Especially for seeing Fluttershy. You holding okay You holding up okay back there? Oh, I'm fine, the Pegasus assured, rubbing the spot on her cheek. The indent had almost finished fading. She looked down at her side and smiled as Angela hopped alongside her. Guilty conscience, eh? That's a little better, I guess. Rainbow Dash questioned, a cocky eyebrow that she said that she wasn't completely convinced. You sure something else didn't come up? I mean, what really changed your mind? You were pretty set against having anything to do with Dusk yesterday. Oh, alright. So clearly the lungs do not like that voice. Well, it sucks to be them. I was, but that was the fear talking, the purple unicorn explained. I was so worried that he wasn't going to be understanding or accepting. If anything, I was afraid he was going to make us into enemies of the state, and it scared me, because, well, thinking back on it, I was so certain that was exactly what I would have done in his position. You know what they say, sometimes you make your own worst enemy. Oh, low blow there, sis. Sorry, bro, no offense meant, you know? The exchange caused every pony in line to blink and look amongst each other. Sis? Bro? I mean, I can see why y'all are going the family route, but really? Siblings? That's another thing, came the reply, as she turned her head to look back at her friends. I didn't even know how to relate to Dusk. Over the course of our stay, all of us developed different relationship ideas regarding our male selves. Fluttershy and Rarity, the both of you came to see Butterscotch and Elusive as partners. This caused the two named ponies to dart their eyes downward as they blushed. Twilight continued unabated. Rainbow Dash, during her short encounter, came to think of Blitz's arrival. Psh, as if. God. The Pegasus piped up from her spot. I can fly circles around that imposter any day of the week. Many among them rolled their eyes, while the two leading ponies exchanged a whisper. She's Blitz's double, all right, the male shared, have to admit, it's a bit weird to see his nature wrapped up in a small form like that. This got a chuckle out of the magician before she started again. Pinkie Pie, I could see from the short time you two were together, both you and Barry became really fast friends. Well, why wouldn't we be? The pink filly squeaked. I like to throw parties. Barry likes to throw parties. Oh, we both equally enjoy sarsaparilla and slushies and muffins and meringue and pin the tail on the pony. I mean, really, what's not to love? An Applejack. The hat-bearing bear perked her head up at her nape. It's mainly thanks to you that I figured out my connection with my double. You and the Applejack of this world came to relate to each other as cousins, that the both of you shared the same family. Well, that's true, Twi, the Applebucker conceded. I admit, when my cult self asked me for another chance of being family, I got rather excited and I got rather relaxed and easy. It felt right, like you really were my cousin. But what's your story? I mean, you already got sibling conniptions whenever I'm around Applebuck. I mean, I already got sibling conniptions whenever I'm around Applebuck. You? The two purple unicorns gave each other a look before the male gave his sister a reassuring smile. Twilight returned the smile before speaking again. It's because, well, last night when I went and took a chance, when I went and spoke with Dusk, the both of us managed to feel something powerful. It felt really strong, stronger than friendship. Like you said, it felt right. It was then that I realized that I was feeling the same way about him that I felt about Spike. And me in the way I feel about Spines, Dusk spoke up. Once she introduced herself to me, once we managed to actually sit down and talk, I realized that my heart was going out for her, the same way it did with Spines. It was there that we started calling each other brother and sister. And it's really worked well for us so far. The filly looked back at her friends with an honest smile. I can say that I feel right whenever I'm around him now, instead of having that awful knot in my larynx. Good thing, too. She turned her head back toward us as she breathed a sigh of relief. Otherwise, I never would have gotten any sleep last night. There was a tumbling noise as the miniature pile pony up occurred. Pile pony up, Jesus. Alright. Needs to be time for some more rest after this. There was a tumbling noise as a miniature pony pile-up occurred. The sound caused the two leaders to pause and stare in confusion. Sleep? Rarity's eyes were wide. Twi, you didn't come back to the hedge after meeting Dusk, did you? Well, it was a rather long walk, and I was, well, falling apart at the end of it, to put it bluntly, but still... Twilight, Dash spoke up this time, her mouth trying to wrestle the words through her lips. You guys didn't... I mean, with Dusk, you didn't, like... Both unicorns raised an eyebrow at the same time. What are you getting at, Miss Dash? The stallion questioned. Now, Applejack assured every pony. You remember, Rares, Twi has a second bed, right? I'm sure it weren't nothing that were... She then turned her green eyes to the parrot and coughed twice. Inappropriate, right, Twi? They got confused lavender stares for a few more seconds before they blanched, the meaning finally registering in their minds. Both boy and girl students blushed furiously before they began sputtering at the same time. How... Really, with him... She's my sister. How could you even... That was all the mares needed to know, as they all laughed at the twins' expense, slowly straightening themselves out and getting to their hooves. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sugar Cube, Farmer apologized, wiping the tears away from her eyes. Yeah, we know you two'd never do that, but that were too precious. The both of you... Hey, Pinky. Wait, what? What? I don't understand. Hang on. Hey, Pinky, make that there count 20, you hear? Am I forgetting a reference already? I think I forgot a reference already. Okay. While Dusk looked at the girls in confusion, the book filly merely shook her head, the blush still present on her face. Very funny, fillies. Now come on, we still have a lot of ways left to go to the library. Barring any more unforeseen events, we should make it there in plenty of time. Eventually, the great tree became visible to them, causing their pace to pick up a bit. As they drew closer to the library, however, one more last unexpected event transpired. Fluttershy yelped as she ducked down. Pinky, who had been trotting in front of her, had seemingly suddenly bucked out both rear hooves behind her. Whoops! Sorry about that, the party pony apologized, before her hind legs began spinning in place. Whoops! It's happening again! The Whopper? Twilight stared at her twitching friend before quickly spinning her head to face her double, his own eyes wide open as he watched the pinky sense go off. Dusk, please tell me you didn't... The colt looked at her, before sighing and shaking his head as he reached a hoof out of the library door. I left a note for Spines before we left this morning. I'm sorry, Twilight. You've explained things to me, but the rest of them deserve an explanation, too. To be continued. Woo! Alright. Awesome! Sick chapter. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. So, yes. That got weird there for a second. Like, I was a little skeptical about the Twilight Duskshine twin cest that almost happened. That was weird. Alright, anyway. So, like I said before, we're going to kind of scrap the idea about the Katawa Shoujo thingy. But I'm going to scrap that in favor of something actually pony-related. Because the next big story on my list after this story is over, by the way, we only have 3 chapters left, is pretty sizable and has a pretty big cast list. So I thought it might be interesting to see if you guys would be interested in doing something like that. So, I'm getting the cast list kind of put together as far as what all characters we need, and then I should hopefully get that posted fairly soon, and then we'll go from there, and we'll do some audition-y stuff, and people can audition, and it'll be awesome. And then we'll all do a fun project together, and it'll be awesome as well, and it'll be fun, and yes. In the meantime, I feel, and probably sounded, pretty crappy. So, I'm going to call it a day. But, before I go, as always, I want to thank you guys for listening, for commenting, for messaging, making requests, subscribing, for telling other people about the channel. You guys are awesome and fantastic. And I cannot get over how, even when I'm gone for a while at a time, people are still commenting and subscribing because you're all fantastic. And I love all of you in a totally not weird way. I swear. So, in the meantime, I'm going to go and probably hack up a lung now. And you guys have a good night. So, good night.